Okay, all. So we are back here for week 6, and I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you so you can see what we're going to be doing this week. So again, hopefully you're finding, I think a lot of you are finding that it's a little bit easier now that lab is kind of finally catching up to lecture. And so they'll kind of work more side by side, which should hopefully help you with both lecture and lab. So for this week, again, you can always go to the syllabus to see where we're at, but I'll just go ahead and scroll down here and show you kind of where you're going to spend most of your time for lecture this week. So for the lecture, we're going to move, we finished the integumentary system last week, and we're going to go ahead and move into the skeletal system. So we're going to start with our first skeletal system series of lectures, which is going to be on skeletal tissue and bones. So we'll kind of start at the cellular and tissue level of organization for the skeletal system and move on up to the organ level, which would be your actual bones. And you will start with this series of lectures for this week, and then next week you'll actually get into the skeleton for lecture. So for this week, you can go ahead and download the skeletal tissue PowerPoint. I do have the review questions if you just want to go ahead and look at the review questions from there. You can also find them on those exam objectives when you look under exam 2 on that exam 2 page. And they're listed out chapter by chapter, but this is just in each section if you just want to go ahead and print those exam review questions right here for this section. Hopefully that'll help you out. And then you can go ahead and watch the recorded lectures. Again, they're broken up into part 1, 2, and 3, so they're slightly shorter lectures, so they're not quite so long. And then make sure that you take the lecture quiz at the end of the week. On bones, it is due by September 30th. Remember that you can take it twice, and it will take your highest score. The goal of these lecture quizzes are, one, to give you a little bit of an idea of the types of questions that I'm going to ask for the exam. You probably saw that again in the last exam. And then also it's to allow you to kind of learn from your mistakes. So one, again, you get to take that quiz twice, and it's going to take your highest score. So you can learn from any mistakes that you made from the first quiz. But it will also give you an idea to kind of get an idea of where you might need a little bit more time studying. So, if maybe you were, not as familiar with intramembranous ossification, which we're going to talk about this week, then you might go back because you missed a question on it. You might go back and spend a little more time studying that. So that's the goal of the lecture quizzes. And again, if you're having any issues with lecture, or you have questions, or again, you want to set up a time with me, we can always do that and meet virtually. So just let me know. And then as for the lab this week, let's go ahead and go back here, and I'll show you where you're going to spend most of your time for lab. So for lab, again, you're going to scroll down to the lab stuff with the cute lab puppy there. And you're going to move on to practical 2 here. And then this week, we're going to move into the rest of the axial skeleton. And then you'll move into the appendicular skeleton, just the upper limb. So first off, again, hopefully you did the skull last week. I know that the skull for some of you was a bit daunting, but if you can in some way get your hands on a skull, that is the ideal, whether it be at the library at Red Mountain, because they do have the bone boxes that you can check out. Although please call the library first and make sure that one's available before you drive down there, because I don't want to waste your time. Or you can go to one of the study labs, either at Southern Dobson or at the Red Mountain campus, and they have all of these skeletal models there available for you to study. And if you can't do that, use the Sketchfab 3D models that I have posted online virtually, so that you can rotate that skull around. Please watch the foramina video that I posted for you. So if you look here, here is the video on the foramina of the skull. So please watch that, because that is, it basically goes over just the foramina, the holes, right, in the skull where you're going to have either blood vessels or nerves going through them. And I think it's easiest to learn them in relation to each other, so you can kind of make that spatial association on where they are. And again, you have all of these tools. You can use the web albums. You can, again, use the 3D models. Those are the Sketchfab models I was talking about. Soft chalk labeling exercises, StudyMate flashcards. There is the bone labeling exercise. I did repost that link because the link was broken. So, and then it has the actual answer keys for that. And then there's a couple other links there as well that you can go through. So please, and then they have, of course, the practice quiz. So you'll see the skull, we've got the skull lab practice quiz there, the axial skeleton practice quiz here. So make sure that you use all those resources. Hopefully they will help you, because you are not in person for lab. And if all else fails and you just really need your hands on a skull and you can't get to any of the open labs, what you could do is you can look online. I know a student just posted that they found one on Amazon for like $29. You can actually buy a skull. A lot of times you can get them used and then use it, you know, for this class. And then when you're done with it, just sell it online. So you can sell it used online, and, you know, you can probably get away with spending a minimal amount of money on that. So that's another option for you as well. So let me go ahead and get into this week's lab. So again, you'll be finishing off the axial skeleton. So we just did the skull last week. So I'm just going to pull up this document and show you kind of where you're going to start this week for the axial skeleton. So again, we got through the skull, and sorry, it's loading very slowly for me here. And you're welcome to print this document as well if it helps to have it printed out or save it on your computer, whatever works best for you. So we're going to start, the hyoid bone technically is a bone that's part of the axial skeleton. And it's the only bone that's kind of suspended from the body, and it's not articulating with any other bones. And you'll see it's suspended from the styloid process of the skull, and it's mainly there to support the muscles of the tongue for swallowing. So it's kind of an interesting bone. And so check that out. I always say it looks like a fetal vampire mandible, but it's not. It's actually the hyoid bone. We don't give you a mandible. The only reason that we would use a fetal skull would be to talk about those fontanelles. So do make sure you know those fontanelles. And then we're going to go through that axial skeleton. So I'm going to show you kind of my Mr. Bones here. So for the axial skeleton, and you can go through this in the handout. But again, the rest of the axial skeleton after you've done the skull is going to basically be, it's going to be your sternum here, your ribs, okay? And then it's going to be your vertebral column. Okay, so it's kind of be basically the trunk of the body, the vertebral column, and then the sacrum and the coccyx, okay? So again, for the axial skeleton, you'll have basically everything, all the trunk of the body, with the exception of the upper limbs, the lower limbs, okay, and what's called the pectoral girdle and the pelvic girdle, okay. And I'll talk about the pectoral girdle in just a minute. Okay, so that's what you're going to do for the rest of this week's lab, for the first half of this week's lab. And please keep in mind that as you go through the vertebra are a little more complicated. So you're going to see there's a lot of pictures of the vertebra, and that's because they're a little bit more complicated. Please watch again my video on the axial skeleton, because I do go through the vertebra for you. So please make sure that you do that, and I'll show you where that is in just a minute. because you're going to need to be able to identify a cervical vertebra. And especially, again, you'll need to know these special ones, C1 and C2, which is going to be, we'll talk about that, your atlas and your axis. So you're going to need to make sure that you know those. And you're going to need to make sure that you can identify as cervical vertebra versus a thoracic vertebra versus a lumbar vertebra. So kind of keep that in mind. And then it talks about, again, knowing the difference between true ribs, false ribs, and floating ribs. So you can kind of go through all of that and you'll get a good idea of what you're going to be doing for that. Now, the second half of the lab, you're actually going to get into what's called the appendicular skeleton. So the appendicular skeleton, again, just like I talked about, is going to be your upper limbs, your lower limbs, and the pectoral and pelvic girdle. The pectoral girdle and the pelvic girdle are basically what attach the limbs to the trunk of the body, the axial, they attach the limbs to the axial skeleton, okay? So that's going to be kind of what you're working on for this week. Oops, sorry, I didn't mean to get you into the YouTube video. So I'm just going to pull up the document here on the axial skeleton. Oh, I'm sorry, I meant to pull up the appendicular, the appendicular skeleton. And so again, you're going to be doing the just the upper limb. So what you're going to be doing is you're going to be doing all of the bones to the upper limb here, to your arms, right? And then you're also going to need to know the pectoral girdle. So what attaches that upper arm to the axial skeleton, which is going to be the pectoral girdle is going to consist of the clavicle, okay, and the scapula back here, okay? So it's the clavicle and the scapula that are going to attach this upper limb to the axial skeleton, okay? And so again, you're going to go through this handout. You can find all of that information right here. You know, take your time with this because again, I want you to know how to pronounce some of these names like capitulum. I don't want you to not know how to pronounce those. Please go back here and please watch the videos that I have posted. And there's actually a couple opportunities. You can watch my videos, or you can also watch Pam Harrison's videos. She made some videos of this as well. So let me see. Here's the video introduction for if you haven't watched the rest of the axial skeleton, watch that. And then you can also watch the beginning of the appendicular skeleton where I go through the upper limb. So, and then if you want, you can watch the lower limb too for next week. But please watch those videos because I think it's really hard to learn these names. And again, I can speak from experience. I told you guys about that last week in the introduction, but please go through and learn how to properly pronounce the names, because otherwise I just think it makes it very challenging. And again, there are these tutorial videos from Pam Harrison. If you like, I suggest you know, watch her on the vertebra as well as mine. And when you watch, you can watch the axial skeleton, but go back and watch specifically hers on the vertebra because the vertebra are really challenging. So that's where I think it might be nice to have the extra video on that. And then please use these 3D labeled Sketchfab models. Again, they are pretty amazing. So here's one on the cervical vertebra. And I know they take a minute to load because there's a lot of, information loaded in there. But these are amazing. And the fact that you can actually manipulate, this is the closest thing that we can give you to getting your hands on these vertebra. So that way then you can kind of manipulate and move them around. And I think it's just a really nice way. Like here, a lot of people have a hard time with a pedicle, which is just this little bridge portion here between what's called the body and then the lamina. These are the lamina. So anyway, I know I'm going into the lab stuff and you can watch the videos on that, but please use these Sketchfab models because it is great to be able to manipulate and move those models around. Okay, so I think that is it. Other than those are most of the resources that I wanted to show you again: soft chalk, labeling exercises, study mate, flashcards. And then this week, please make sure you just check yourself. Again, there's no grades for this, but please test yourself on that axial skeleton practice quiz. All right, and again, if you have any questions or issues with lab or lecture, please email me, and I'll set up a time if we need to so that we can get together and talk or meet virtually. All right, that's it. You guys have a great week, and we will hopefully, talk either this week or see you next week.